Hello and welcome to the first episode of 2024's Before They Knew Better. It's Before They Knew Better, back for a new year, still with DIY Magazine, still with me. My name is Lisa Wright and my lovely co-host and producer, Giles Bidder.
Yeah, and on today's episode, we've got James Smith from Yard Act, and you love Yard. We both love Yard Act, and DIY has some serious history there, don't they?
You know what? DIY did Yard Act. I'm going to say it was either second or third ever live show back in the sort of confusing days of mid-pandemic 2021 when we couldn't put bands on properly. We filmed Yard Act for a live session, which you can still watch on YouTube if you search for Hello 2021 DIY Magazine. It was genuinely, I was there watching that day, and I remember they were just immediately brilliant. Just one of those bands where it was just very, very obvious from the first minute of watching them that they were onto something pretty special, which they have gone on to underline time and time again. Now they have second album, Where's My Utopia? That is coming out on March the 1st. We had James on the podcast for the first episode, cracking open the jar of 2024. And what did we ask him to bring in, Giles?
Well, we got him to bring him a photo, and we got him to bring in a song and an item, all of which are ace, neat, boss,
hey.
etc. Excuse me.
Etc. And as well as all of those adjectives, they were also very football-y, which might...
We needed to kind of steer it away from the United chat, didn't we?
Yeah, he loves... well, actually, you know what? For a man who's brought in a lot of football-based things, actually doesn't seem to like football that much at all, doesn't really care, but did when he was a kid. And that's what this podcast is about. So, if you want to listen to James Smith of Yard Act, who I'm going to put it out there, is probably one of the funniest people I've met in ever.
And it's natural. It's a natural kind of funny.
Yeah, and, you know, he has the benefit of that sort of northern twang, which makes everything sound funnier than us stupid southerners anyway. So, crack on, listen to James Smith of Yard Act talk about all of his footballing youth, his musical youth, growing up in not Leeds, spoiler alert, actually Warrington, and then... get your pre-orders out for Where's My Utopia, because, you know, early contender for an album of 2024. Yeah,
easy.
Props. Yeah, easy. Oh, also, we should say thank you to Focusrite, who have been giving us the gear to record this podcast on for the whole series so far. So props to Focusrite. Everyone go and look at their Vocaster software. And another thing that we should tell you is that this is the last episode of this first series of Before They Knew Better with DIY Magazine. We're going to be taking a little break for like a month, something like that. And then we will be back with another 12 sterling, wonderful guests. But, you know, we didn't want to leave you hanging at the start of this new year. We wanted to pop in, say hi, leave you with Yard Act, and then, you know, maybe you've got a month to go back and listen to the previous episodes. But until then, this is Yard Act's James Smith on the 12th episode of Before They Knew Better, the last episode, the big hurrah of the first season. Thank you for listening. Carry on listening to James. You were talking back then about being a teenager in the pub. This is obviously a podcast about being young.
Yeah.
Was that the sort of prime social thing that you and your mates would do when you were a teen? Or, like, would you be kids that, like, went and, like, did wholesome hobbies and activities as well?
No. It was, park. And then there was, like, the rugby club put on discos every other Friday. It was that for a while. I mean, what was going on that dance floor was disgusting.
He's a normal man.
And then I mean, I was like one of the youngest in the year and very baby faced, so I did struggle getting in the pubs for a bit, and like used some awful lookalike fake IDs and stuff to try and get in, because it was it was on the cusp where people didn't really actually, pubs tended to be all right. It was more going into town, into Warrington on a weekend. I just couldn't get in. Like the bouncers wouldn't let me in because I looked about 2, and I was about 15, so obviously not allowed in clubs. But I also wasn't that bothered about that. I've always been more pub culture than club culture, and I wonder if maybe those early years of not being able to get into the clubs were more formative, because there maybe were a couple of us that did retreat to the sort of, the nooks in the local pubs where we could be served a couple of pints of lager and we weren't going to cause any trouble, and we'd talk about films and music instead of, dropping a couple of these and having the time of our lives. Not that it wasn't. It wasn't loads of fun talking about Hot Fuzz. Yeah. For hours on end every Friday fucking night.
Yeah. What would be like the main places that people went out in Warrington?
Well, I mean, I was more of an alternative kid, so there was a great indie club called WA1 where I used to play a lot of gigs actually with my old band.
Nice.
When I was a teenager, and they used to. I actually used to DJ there a little bit. That's where I did my first bits of DJing, and I just loved that place. That was good. There was a pub around the corner from that called the White Hart Hotel. I always liked Friars Court, where Yard Act actually played. It wasn't a venue at the time, but they've turned it into a proper. That's like the sort of small indie music venue in Warrington now is Friars Court. But that used to stay open late, and everywhere else you kind of end up there after 2 a.m. I'm saying that I didn't go out in town, and I'm just listing what I did for most Friday nights of my youth. But the big one was like, I mean, there was stuff like Flares, and I can't remember what it was.
Liquid and Envy, that sort of vibe.
Stuff like, I mean, because Warrington was like incredibly known for Mr. Smith, so I don't know if you remember Mr. Smith's nightclub. Obviously, it predates us, but it was like renowned across the country as like a club in Mecca, and that was on the riverside, and it became like, it's probably like an Oceana or something now, but it's still a mega club, and like sometimes you'd get in there if you were out with for somebody else's birthday or whatever.
One of those places where you have to have like an equal ratio of men and women, or they'd only let a man in if they were with like 5 girls or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, it was just one of those mega. I don't like big places. I struggle with them. I get slightly stressed. I do like small spaces. And there was a club called Sassy's that would let anyone in, so that's the one that I used to go into most. And that was like these sort of emo sort of. Mosher. That was like that was just like 14-year-olds all like necking. Adults didn't go in there. Like it would be, if you saw a man at the bar in there, you'd be freaked out. But I mean, I love Warrington. I hold it dear to my heart.
Well,
I
this
kind of miss
is
it a bit.
The thing that I guess, like, you're so heavily associated with Leeds that I think probably a lot of people don't realise that you grew up there.
Yeah, they don't.
So Warrington, you were in Warrington until uni? So Warrington was your whole sort of like growing up, like all of those formative...
Warrington, a little bit... My dad lived in Runcorn, so I spent a little bit of time in Runcorn with my dad, but mostly in Warrington with my mum.
Paint the picture. What were you like as a, looking back now, like objectively, what were you like as a kid? If you've got a kid yourself now, what kind of kid were you? Were you a bit goofy? Were you a bit nerdy? Music obviously seems to be like the thing, like the driving force behind a lot of what you were doing. And what were your mates like? What kind of role did you play in your pal group?
I was quite submissive. Which is something that I've lost in time. I'm now overbearing and dominate everyone. When I was younger, I mean, I've always been goofy, always been very silly. Definitely just raised in a silly house.
Great.
Despite it not being, and I'm not, I don't, this isn't something that I feel the need to go into, and I don't want to go down this path, but like, despite it wasn't a happy household, my mum and dad weren't happy together, but there was a lot of laughter, and I think I'm only just coming to this conclusion now. You've asked the question and I'm saying it on this podcast. But I think those two things have probably been the knife edge of my life has been humour and just misery, really, and how the balance of the two is really important. Just very, very normal, silly childhood, playing out with kids on the street when I was younger, and had a couple of mates at primary school that kind of didn't spend that long with. There was like kids on the football team, but again, I wasn't really good at football. I mean, I loved football, but I was crap at it. I didn't really fit in. I wasn't a sporty kid. Wasn't into music at this point. Didn't play any instruments. Wasn't having any lessons in any instruments or whatever. Cartoons, that's what I used to do. I used to draw. I was obsessed with South Park and The Simpsons and Disney and drawing. We used to sit on the street I grew up on, like in the summer holidays. I remember like all the kids on the street would congregate on whoever's doorstep and just draw for hours and hours. We'd bring out the VHSs of the Disney films and copy from them. And like Simpsons comics, I had loads of them, and then South Park was probably quite a life-changing thing for me, because I mean, if you remember when the adverts started coming out for that, I was 8. I think it must have been 7 or 8 at the time, and like you're selling something that bright and colourful to a kid, like, and then coupling it with the humour, and the funny thing is like looking back now, those early series of South Park are crap. Like they're not like they're not half as shocking as what we've seen since. So like the shock humour's gone, but the jokes aren't very good. And I actually think South Park had a golden peak about sort of probably 7 or 8 years later, after everyone had kind of stopped watching it, where its social sort of satire was like bang on, and it was kind of doing and saying things like that now wouldn't be acceptable, but like, you know, but were like actually quite astute at the time, and then it kind of waned again. But it was, I can't deny that it was a huge influence on my life.
I think like I had a South Park duvet set when I was about 10 years old, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, I think like that, like that was like the first time that something, I don't know, it was definitely, I mean, I guess you had like Beavis and Butthead or something like that in earlier generations, but for like our generation.
We used to try and rent that all the time.
Yeah, and it felt so naughty, and so, but also kind of like aimed, like, I guess it wasn't really aimed at kids, but it sort of felt like it was aimed at kids, or like it had like a kids introduction thing because it was a cartoon, and so you could like sort of have ownership over it, even though it was like rude, and like that felt like, did it feel like sort of rebellious?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I remember you'd be like, what was the other one? Like when King of the Hill came on, you'd be like, cartoon, and then it'd be like, this isn't very funny. But now I love that. Like, I think the droll humour of King of the Hill is one of my favourites. Yeah, I love cartoons basically, and it's something that I've carried with me into adulthood. But I'm not very good at finding them and stuff. I do tend to I've got Disney Plus, and I tend to just rewatch The Simpsons on a loop over and over again, and it just pisses.
Isn't it?
My wife doesn't allow me to watch it at night because she says it's too loud. Even depending on, no matter what volume I have it on, it's too loud. Apparently, The Simpsons. I get it. She says it's too shouty, but like, you know, cartoons I find a comfort. I used to love, you know, watching cartoons on a Saturday morning. There's something about the colours that I find very comforting, and I wanted to be an animator when I was a kid. I had this sort of dream that that's what I was going to do.
Did you pursue it at all?
Which was cut short. Well, no, because I wasn't allowed to do art at GCSE because I got into a bit of... I was not a naughty child at all, and I wasn't really that rebellious, but I really, really fell out with the teacher of the art department because I told her she didn't have any passion and shouldn't be teaching the subject, and I threw a pot of glue across the room, and so I wasn't allowed to do GCSE art, and I think that kind of stopped my... I don't know if I would have got into music if I'd carried on with the art path, because that's all I was interested in. But, you know, I never painted. I never had paints as a kid or anything. It was always just felt tips and crayons, felt tips and shading pencils and stuff. And And when I first went to high school, I remember being like really drawn in by these giant well, they seemed giant. They were probably like A2, which is still quite big. Like an A2 canvas that clearly GCSE students had done or whatever, of like they'd painted a Coke can or whatever. And I remember being like, oh, I can't wait to do that. And then that, you know, for whatever reason, that didn't happen.
So you told the teacher you don't have enough passion. That's a reversal of roles.
Yeah. Because I really liked my first teacher when I was in year 7 and 8, and then I got this. There was a new one. I don't know. I was out of line to say that. I definitely shouldn't have told.
No,
her.
I think that's well within your right. If they're acting like
I don't know if it is. Is it? I don't know. She was probably just trying her best. She was probably exhausted by cunts like me. I was probably a dick. I was definitely a dickhead as well. I was like a gobby show off. Some things never changed.
Artists do act like that, though.
Yeah, it was very much like sit at your stool and paint by numbers. It felt like that to me. I found it really stressful because it's not what I'd expected art to be.
As a 13-year-old.
But, yeah, I mean, well... Yeah, I'd had quite an inspiring teacher in those first 2 years that felt... And he also lived in the village, and in his garden he'd carved a tree. He'd chopped his tree and carved it and whittled the top and painted it so it looked like a giant pencil was in his garden. So I found that very really inspiring as a kid. Like, that was out there. That was like, you know, and he used to draw with his mouth. He used to ask us to like... He'd be like, name an animal, and they'd draw it with his mouth without looking. And
fucking yes,
it was like Mr. Grimes. His name was. It was, I loved him. And then I can't, you know, I don't know. Schools are. It's funny how these things can tip you very fast in one direction. These formative years, and all because of people that are responsible for so much of what you're interested in. You know. Not being able to do art at GCSE is a very first world problem in comparison to what some people go through. So, you know, and it turned out all right, I suppose. But
who was the person that steered you towards music then once art had sort of taken a backseat?
Myself, really. Music department, I wasn't really excelling in that. Because I never learned an instrument, I didn't understand, I couldn't read music, which when you were doing GCSE music... when music before that, I didn't really have any sort of tangible connection to. And also I had that really ignorant thing where don't like classical music, I like rap music, so why am I sitting through this? Which now is stupid, and I wish I'd listened more and realised that actually classical music's incredible and you can learn a lot from it. And also, because of the sort of copyright laws, a lot of it is royalty free, so if you want to sample because you like rap music, classical music's a good place to go. So should have been paying a bit more attention. But I managed to get drum lessons through the school after a long and lengthy battle because I didn't have a drum kit and because I was left-handed. The teacher had said I wasn't. So basically, my mum and dad, we lived in like a little terrace house, and for me to choose that. When I got into music, probably because I love rap and hip hop so much, I decided I wanted to learn the drums. That was like the last instrument I should have been allowed to learn. But because I was so persistent, I went into the break room at school on my own pretty much every break and dinner for a year and a bit, trying to get 5 minutes on the kit, like jostling with older kids to try and get behind the kit to prove that I was serious, because they'd said, if you don't have a drum kit at home, you can't have drum lessons because you're not serious about it. And my mum and dad said, if you're not having drum lessons, you can't have a drum kit because you're not serious about it. So I was in this sort of stalemate purgatory. So I used to go in, and I think actually this probably ties in really early on. You said, what were you like with your friends? Like for a couple of years, I didn't really have any friends. For the start of high school, I kind of drifted from my primary school friends. Again, there was people knocking around. Again, people like, because I played football and stuff, there were people on the football team and people in my class that were mates, but I didn't have much in common with them. And I was hell-bent on this drum thing, really. It kind of really, it's like looking back, it's like, wow, you were serious about that. And it's funny because I've never played a drum kit. So it's very weird that I was obsessed with this idea of being a drummer. And and it wasn't the greatest struggle that a human being has ever faced, but it's funny how much I persevered with it when all the signs were telling me, will you just get a guitar or a keyboard or something that you can plug headphones into the amp of and do it in your room quietly? Because I went for the drums.
Do you think that was because you really did have an affinity with the drums, or do you think it was because once you sort of got to a point where there was all of those odds, you were just a sort of stubborn kid that wouldn't say no to these things?
I don't know. The reason that I ended up with drums in the first place was, and this ties back into cartoons. So the first big musical influence for me that really, really connected was Gorillaz.
Yeah.
And it was because they were a cartoon. So I was drawn to Gorillaz because of the animation, and then the music because the music's great, got me as well and got me hooked. And so this was in primary school, probably last year of primary school, I'm imagining, and with a couple of friends that I hung around with at the time, we all liked Gorillaz, and I'd started drawing us as a cartoon band, very much in the style of Gorillaz. Nice. And when we were discussing what instruments we would play in this band we were forming, everyone else just claimed, I'm doing this. And then all that was left was drums. And they went, you do drums. And I very submissively, despite having animated everyone into this band, and come up with the idea of starting a band that was an entire rip-off of Gorillaz, I went, okay, I'm the drummer. And that's when I started saying to my mum and dad I wanted a drum kit. And they were like, what? And I was like, well, I started this band at school. And they were like, what are you on about? And that's really funny because that was when I wrote my first lyrics as well. I started writing lyrics for this band that didn't exist. And it was funny because our singer, he was our rapper, was called Colin, right? And Colin had designated himself as the rapper. And so he was rapper, and Dan was on bass, and Tom was on guitar, and that had been decided. So I was on drums because that was all that's left. So I just started drawing myself as a drummer. And that in itself, I don't know at what point I realised this band didn't actually exist, and that none of those people. Colin did rap; he was very good at rapping, Big Willie style. He could do the whole of that album back to front. But yes. no one played those instruments. Yeah, I don't know at what point, because I stopped hanging out with those kids sort of fairly soon after when we went to high school. But I seem to have still latched onto this idea that I was going to play the drums. Well, that stuff's quite cosmic in a way, because there was that was like a throwaway thing that kids say in the playground, and for some reason it altered my entire life and my ambitions as a young adult. It's weird, saying it. I've thought about this stuff recently since I had my lad. I've thought more and more about my youth. I reflect on it in a way that I never did previously. And I think, on the new album, there's a couple of tracks that delve deep into quite specific incidents from youth and, teenage years that I don't think I would have thought about unless I'd had a kid, because I reflected very differently on it since I had our Huey. But I don't know what compelled me, but it did change my life. This stubborn, it's not even stubbornness. I don't know.
Tenacity.
I think it was naivety. Tenacity of submissive youth.
But look where it's ended up now with you working with Remy from Gorillaz. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I've downplayed that. I've not. A little bit. And Damon's mentioned, he's a fan in a few interviews, which is
come on.
It's kind of freaky, because that's not that is I do credit Damon Albarn and Jamie Hewlett with starting me on this journey.
I ain't happy, I'm feeling glad I got sunshine in a bag, I'm useless.
That's not gushing, that was that light switch moment for me. That was the Beatles to Oasis or whatever. It was Gorillaz for me, and it's I find it funny all the Blur stuff in the summer when they were doing Wembley and stuff, and my wife, she's a bit older than me, so Blur are kind of her band. She's very much Blur, and it's I love Blur, obviously they're great, but it was Gorillaz for me. And I think for probably people my age and a couple of years younger, that whole impact, it wasn't Blur or Oasis, it was Gorillaz. Like, Gorillaz changed my outlook, and they opened my eyes and ears to so much music, you know, just quite underground rap. Like, Del the Funky Homo Sapien was not a mainstream rapper. He wasn't on the radio. And when you learn about, like, Del and, like, the hieroglyphics, and you start to, like, go into, like, alternative left field rap. Obviously they had, like, MF Doom on the second record and Roots Maneuver. Obviously Roots Maneuver felt like a very big British phenomenon at that time, so maybe I would have heard about Roots Maneuver otherwise. But, you know, Del, MF Doom, like, that wouldn't have happened without sort of Gorillaz. They Trojan horse, like, underground alternative music onto the radio very fast, and for a 10-year-old to be listening to that is amazing. Like,
there's nothing cooler than going back to those first Gorillaz records and thinking, oh, I had no idea that De La Soul was on that. And then you start piecing together, and there's such a joy, there's so much, like, reward and, like,
absolutely
good feeling in that.
De La Soul, actually, I can't credit for Gorillaz for, because they were on that Adidas advert, 3 is the magic number, and that got me into De La Soul. And I bought 3 Feet High and Rising from the Music Zone in Warrington, because when I knew this name De La Soul. This was around the time of, like, Napster and BearShare as well, so I was illegally downloading as well. I remember I used to give my dad a list of songs I wanted, and I'd write them down, and he'd set the computer going overnight to get them, and in the morning he'd be like, let's listen to Forgot About Dre, explicit, like that'd be like that. And
Dad, the wide boy.
Yeah, my dad loved rap music. Like, I basically ripped all his KRS-One and Public Enemy CDs off the shelf. He had the Marshall Mathers LP, and I wasn't allowed to listen to it. He bought that in, like, when it came out, before Eminem had kind of really, I mean, he was still massive by that second record, but before he'd gone widescreen. Cypress Hill, we used to listen to Black Sunday in the van on the way to football practice. That was but I think that's another amazing thing about music, is that those voices, Tom Waits, I mean, not Tom Waits, the rapper Tom Waits, like those alien sounding voices when you've got no image, you know, because I was listening to this music, Cypress Hill, like Be Real's voice, it's like, and because of the Space Jam soundtrack as well, that very much felt like I was listening to aliens from outer space coming through the stereo in the car, and like that, and then, like, Tom Waits doing his, like, Swordfish Trombones and I used to look at the front cover of Swordfish Trombones and just wonder what the fuck was going on, and I was like, did that man make that music? Which one of those two men that are holding each other made that music? Like, but my dad still has impeccable taste in music, and he's never had any formula to what he likes. Like, Sophie Ellis Bextor was on, like, he loved Sophie Ellis Bextor. He got really into Bhangra, which was quite a short-lived phase, actually. I've not heard him listen to Bhangra in 20 years, but, like, when sort of Bhangra was taking, what was that big Bhangra hit called? I can't remember. Like, it was the one that kind of, like, transcended into the mainstream. Again, it was used on an advert, but he bought a couple of Bhangra compilations for the car off the back of that. He looked Fun-Loving Criminals, like, and that was another one. The Pulp Fiction snippets in Scooby Snacks. I just wondered, like, the visions I had of the woman yelling, "Every fucking last one of you!" Like, the monster I could see in my head as a kid sat in my dad's van as this was playing and we were on our way somewhere. It was like, that's exciting. I think hopefully it gives you a little bit of imagination. I don't know. But,
yeah. I think also there's something to, like, when you're listening, because obviously now you can just Google everything immediately, whereas, like, maybe even back then it was, you know, obviously, like, the internet was around, but, like, you know, it wasn't such common practice to immediately go and look up every single thing about that person. So it did feel like this sort of more magical quality where like you didn't really know who was the face on the other end of that voice, and you might not see a picture of the person if they didn't have their face on the album cover for ages until they went on like Top of the Pops, and it just like felt a little bit more, I don't know, like magical perhaps.
It's something I'm trying to get back towards a little bit is when I find something I really like musically, that's enough for me. And you don't need to know everything. Like, but then again, that said, I also find I've been listening to this podcast, and like learning about Howlin' Pele like was was interesting. But maybe I want to know about him now because I've lived with the Hives for 15, 20 years, Maybe I didn't want to know that. When they came out, there was a mystery to the Hives. That mystery about bands and that is exciting, Yeah, I do think the internet has destroyed that. It's a shame. And, I do it. You lean into the mundanity of who you are because people can connect to that. They want to connect to people that like them. But at the same time, we do need those Sun Ra's and we need those Princes and those Bowies. Like, I don't think it's going to be me. I'm not. That's unfortunately I don't have that much charisma and strength to be that. But so I'll be who I am. I'll be the everyman. But everyone else, I think I hope there is more mystery in other artists.
Well, I think the power in it is that it forces us to use your imagination.
Yeah.
And that's the most powerful thing of all.
It certainly is, Giles, isn't it?
It's true. It's totally true.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you. I love my imagination. Some of the shit I make up is brilliant. Like all this, everything that's come before this, just winging it. None of this is true. So I lived on the south side of Warrington, Lim, a village in Warrington, but basically a mile over and you're technically into Manchester. I mean, the Trafford Centre was like a purpose-built shopping centre. Do you know about the Trafford Centre? It was a very big deal in the northwest when it arrived.
Before the Arndale.
It's garish. Oh no, it's not in the. It's off the motorway. It's a purpose-built mecca for shopaholics such as myself. And
like the Meadow Hall. The Sheffield Meadow.
Yeah. It's big, but it's like when I first went to Meadow, I've only ever been to Meadow Hall once because my girlfriend from back home, when we both went to uni, she went to Sheffield, and I used to go and visit her on the weekends. And one time we went to Meadow Hall, and I got really claustrophobic and thought I was freaking out because it basically felt like someone had crushed the walls of the Trafford Centre in. It's like a condensed, compacted Trafford Centre, because it looks the same inside, and all the shops are basically identical. Like I was freaking out because I felt like the walls were closing in on me when I went to Meadow Hall. The ambience of the Trafford Centre is one that I'm always aspiring to when I step into a Ring Road shopping centre.
And you lived near the United training ground.
Yeah, a couple of miles. That was like a village over. Like 6 miles away, so we used to go there. The best day to go to there was because they used to be at the Cliff, which was more in central Manchester, but then they moved to Carrington. And when they moved to Carrington, I remember it being like quite a big deal because it was pretty close, and also because it was like out in the there was nothing around it, so you could just pull up and wait, and the players would either stop or they wouldn't. And the best day to go was, like in the holidays, it would be rammed with kids. But if you could figure out a day when your school... I mean, my mum sorted all this out. I wasn't that tactical. My mum knew to take us on a day when we had an inset day, but the other schools in the area might not, because you could just go and it'd be dead, and the players would be more likely to stop. So I met... the reason that I use this is my photo. Well, it's funny. Did you get sent the photo? You haven't?
Yeah, looking at it right now.
We've got a series of homemade autograph book clippings, I would say.
Yeah,
but you've got all the big ones. There's Beck's in his prime.
Well, so I mean, see, this is the reason. Well, I watched the Beckham documentary, obviously, and I was saying to Lindsay, I was like, I was saying to my wife, Lindsay, I was like, I've met David Beckham. She was like, have you? I was like, yeah, I've totally forgot. I have met David Beckham. I've met him like twice, like, you know, and I had like, and so like and then this came up, and I was like, I've got to get this picture of me and Beckham. And so I messaged my mum. I was like, have you still got all them like old sort of photos of United things? She was like, yeah, absolutely. They're in like a shoebox in the cupboard. I'll dig them out. And she started sending them all through, and I was like, where's the one of me and Beckham? And she was like, your sister's cut you out of this one. So that picture you've got of Beckham, my sister's just cut me off it out of spite. I'm there with it. Yeah.
Wow.
It's not quite as exciting. You've just got a picture of Beckham. I'm not in it. But I was. My sister cut me out in spite.
Oh,
so
my
can we
God.
visualise for the listener? We're looking at the one. So it's Beck's, and you can see that it's sort of like a portrait size. So your sister has got a pair of scissors and quite neatly cut you out because he's holding a flyer or he's holding your autograph book, is he?
Yeah.
You can see that he's looking at someone, and the someone he's looking at is
mate.
you, but...
Yeah. So I actually made it funnier when I realised I'm not actually in it and there's not actually proof, apart from the fact that my mum definitely took that picture of David Beckham handing her. Yeah.
Is that not amazing that there is Beck's, right? And I'm sure someone's got enough technology to zoom into his eyes and see your face in Beck's eyes.
Amazing.
But isn't that amazing? You've got a photo of Beck's looking directly at you.
Yeah, it's
Did
pretty
you
mad,
take it
isn't
up with your sister after when you found out that she'd cut you out? Did you have a word?
Our turbulent years are over. I'm not going to bring it up. I don't know when she did that. Like I saw her recently. Actually, she's great, my sister. She's actually in the other photo I sent of us with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
Love that.
That's my younger sister Hannah, and
Nice.
we get on well now. But when we were a bit younger, we maybe... Well, the problem was, Hannah won't mind me saying this, was that I was kind of like golden boy. I wasn't any trouble. And her and my mum kind of... It was always... I can't... And I maybe just loaded it just by not being chaos. I maybe... made it harder for her just by simply being a goody two shoes. But I love my sister very much.
She looks
great.
naughty.
I do.
You can see it in her face.
Yeah, she's the more responsible one now. She's gone on to like actually live a life worth living, and that's not true. I've lived a life worth living. God, what? That's way too dramatic. No, I think she's contributed to. She's contributed to society much more than I have. She's a grafter.
She worked with Elton John.
She's
is the
very
question.
independent. Yeah, no, she hasn't, she never bloody will.
She never will.
No, she's great. No, she cleaned out ambulances during COVID, which is much more noble.
Wow,
that is quite good. Do you remember many of the interactions with the players? Like, can you remember who was particularly nice and or anything that you said to them?
Good question.
I mean, I'm probably pretty starstruck. I can't remember really striking up conversations with him. I remember some of the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer said to us, probably in that photo actually, because I remember my mum taking a bag of crisps off my sister right before the photo. She's like, "You're not having your crisps in the photo," and she took the crisps off her. And I remember Ole Gunnar Solskjaer just in his Norwegian accent going like, "Oh, no crisps allowed in the photos," like that. I remember him saying no crisps allowed in the photos, so I remember that.
Brilliant.
I was on the Sky Sports News loop with Roy Keane for 24 hours after he got sent off against Porto. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you're football fans. It's funny. The reason that I chose all these football themed things for this podcast was because I found it after the Beckham documentary, I got really nostalgic and I remembered so much about Man United in the 90s. And then I realised, because we get it a lot, Yardak get asked a lot about Leeds United, and people on tour just do this banter with us. And I'm like, none of us give a fuck. And I haven't followed football in 15, 20 years. I just don't get it. It's something that was so all encompassing in my life, and then just disappeared completely. And it's something that when there's a game on in the pub or whatever, I go, I'd love to get into this again. And I just go, I just can't be fucked. I don't have the time. Like, when am I going to have time to check the scores or sit in a pub for an hour and a half watching a football match? Like, my life doesn't work like that anymore. But a part of me also misses it, and it was very formative.
That Beckham documentary, it's funny, innit? Because like, I was never really into football, but like watching that, I remembered all of it so viscerally, and like it was just like a different level of celebrity there.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think even if you didn't care about football, you just knew all these people and you knew all the culture, and like, I don't know, like from that sort of period, like, do you think that it was, I don't know, was it that you were really big into football, or did you just really kind of like love following these people? Was it about the people more?
No, for me, it was definitely football at the time. Like, we followed football in our house for a while.
And you used to play?
I mean, like my dad, I used to play, yeah, I was terrible, but it's just quite a formative thing that everyone, especially at that time, it was kind of like your boy joins the football team, wasn't it? It didn't, even though I was crap, there was definitely a sort of weird stigma that I couldn't stop. Not from my parents or anything, from me, I think. Like, there was a definite, I'm meant to do this, gender role being sort of played out, I think, which is quite interesting. But then what happened was I actually stopped playing football for a bit, and then I hit puberty and went back to it as a sort of 15, 16-year-old, despite having no interest in the Premier League or watching football. And I was actually all right then. Like, once I sort of went through puberty and sort of had a sort of
growth spurt.
Yeah, growth spurt, and like and got into exercise in a different way. I actually played okay football, and I played for a few years. I even played when I moved to Leeds, like at the College of Music. There used to be like a Wednesday night football like thing, and I used to play most Wednesdays for the sort of first year of uni. And I've played sporadically since, and I enjoy it as a sport. But it's just something that's left my life entirely. But no, I was very much into Manchester United. It wasn't the pop culture thing. But watching that Beckham documentary, he did single-handedly pretty much make football a sort of pop culture phenomenon rather than a sports phenomenon, I think. And I think his union with Posh
loved it.
Was integral to that. And but even just like, I mean, like, I used to put Brill cream in my hair because Beckham did, and like,
yeah, did you ever do that thing where
it's a crap product, and it's definitely not a product for an 8-year-old boy who's got that like.
Did you shave the little bit out of your
in-between
eyebrow?
What's the guy from the In-Between, Simon from the In-Betweeners, when he has that little like fork at the front of his head? Like, I had that for years, but I'd try and Brill cream it up and wonder why it'd flop. Yeah, I don't know.
You know, he like shaved a little notch out of his eyebrow.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. I mean, I remember everything being banned at school, obviously, inevitably, that David Beckham did. The funniest one was, do you remember the Ronaldo? Not Cristiano Ronaldo, the original Brazilian Ronaldo, when he just had like the hair, the like the half, like the semicircle on the front of his head. Do you remember that cut?
Not really, but I can picture it.
Well, I remember like people had that for the summer holidays, and then I didn't. But like people had that for the summer holidays, and then like on the first day of school they had to shave off the half D and go full shave because like, yeah, people were walking around with like my mum kept saying, "You're not having that. It looks like a cow pat." That's what she kept saying. I wasn't allowed because it looked like a cow pat.
My mum and my sister would be like, "That's so chavvy."
Chavvy, the half moon cow pat on the forehead. Yeah, it's. It was a terrible haircut, but it definitely, I feel like he did that just to get one over on Beckham. I think he was a bit like, you're going to do the Mohican, I'm going to do the half moon cow pat.
Well, it's that Nathan Barley thing, isn't it? That like, there must be, you know, that episode of Nathan Barley where one of them goes and puts like loads of paint in his hair just to see whether all of like the people will follow him as a trend. And it's like that footballers could just do literally anything and be like, just watch them copy me.
Yeah, but you didn't see all the terrified men start wearing sarongs when Beckham did that. That was very progressive when he wore that sarong.
Wasn't it? Yeah, I was watching. Yeah.
Do you know what I loved in that documentary as well? Have you seen the documentary, Giles?
Yeah, I loved it.
Do you know what I loved? His dad at that bit when he rang his dad to tell him he'd worn a sarong, and his dad looked in the papers and he went, thought you looked quite good. And I was just like, yeah, like, it's like this like really progressive like kitchen fitter, just like, go on, son, wear your sarong. I was like, that's fucking great.
There's a lot of sympathy, you know, you get through. I mean, one of the things that we haven't spoken about here is how United won the treble around that time, which was just like, you know, pop culture, sport culture, everything British culture. That was like a tectonic fucking wave, wasn't it? That was splashed everywhere.
Yeah, well, amazing. Yeah, we went to Manchester when the bus drove around, the open top bus.
Nice.
So yeah, I was there for that. I remember that. I think that was probably the pinnacle of my love of football when my team was winning everything. I got bored after that. No, it was, and it was funny because I mean that aligns quite quick. That does align quite well with me starting to get into music, which I wasn't really at the time. I mean, I liked music and it was on and it was around. And I was listening to stuff, but I wasn't I wasn't like invested in it. And I think the turning point for that was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, the PlayStation game. I think a lot of people had their eyes and ears open to a lot of music, you know, a lot of rap, punk, hardcore.
Killer soundtrack.
Yeah, amazing. And getting into sort of alternative and skateboard culture off the back of that.
Dyeing your hair pink.
That kind of was... I mean, yeah, but yeah. So that was where that was the part in the Venn diagram where where I had a football shirt and spiky pink hair, like,
love it.
Which now, I mean, that just seems quite normal now, but at the time that was quite bold and out there. Not many people were merging cross sections of society like I was.
So the object that you've chosen relates to all of... So, okay, right, I'm going to show my ignorance here, but that's like Subbuteo, right? Or is it not?
No, that's not Subbuteo. Come on.
What are they, the little... What?
Power Pods. Do you not remember Power Pods?
Do you remember Power Pods? Crazy, chocolate mad. Grab a power pod and go mental with the lads.
I don't think they said mental, but I think it was grab a power pod and play football with the lads.
Play football,
go mental. Maybe they did actually. You could probably say mental on an advert in the 90s.
Yeah, you can say.
You could say it. I'm not going to say it. Grab a power pod and go mental with the lads. Yeah.
What are power pods?
Yeah, power pods. Do you not remember them?
No.
Well, you know, I was quite into collecting figurines and stuff, and to be honest, I was kind of in a. There was other stuff I could have chosen maybe, but I was in a little bit of a like, I decided to do this football theme thing, but that's been derailed because you've asked for Clint Eastwood instead of the Lightning Seas now. So it doesn't even have to be that. I suppose we could use it as a jump off to discuss my my creative imagination when it comes to playing with different toys, because I definitely use them to play sort of roles in adventures I was playing in my... I played with like toys and action figures and stuff. Until like later than I did creative play until later than most kids
like
probably would.
21,
probably
22.
Again, first few years. I mean, I still do that now. Yeah, but definitely into my first few years of high school, I'd get home from school and kind of play with my toys. Obviously, I would never tell anyone that, and that would. It's funny because why would that be seen as such an embarrassing, weird thing to just like. Do that, but I did, and again, this was around the time when I had no mates. So,
did you give them voices?
Sort of, but I did a lot of it in my head because in my head I was playing out these quite big sort of journeys and stories, and the power pods would always, because I had quite a lot of power pods, they would always kind of play the role of like a sort of army in it. They'd be like a sort of horde because I had enough of them to sort of represent a horde.
That does, because, I mean, essentially, when kids are playing stories like that, it is just telling... And, like, you know, you're a man that writes stories and that has written a book, I believe, that hasn't... I swear, yeah. So, like, the fact that that was, like, a sort of transitional thing where you still, you know, maybe you still needed something physical there to sort of, like, play the part, but you were essentially just, like, writing a narrative, but with a physical thing in place to help do it. So when you think of it in like the context of, you know, of course you were still doing that because you're a storyteller, you know, a professional storyteller in your adult life. I don't know, I think it makes sort of a lot of sense that you would still be doing that.
Yeah, but I mean, I just think, yeah, it was just like, yeah, it's just playing in imagination. It is knocked out of us, I suppose, isn't it? It's like
big time.
What you're 12 years old and you're going out to play with your toys. What are you doing that for? It was like that. Like if anyone had found out, you know what I mean? Which is it's just a very strange mentality. You know, I think it is different now, but I think, you know, I think nerd. I mean, it wasn't really nerd culture. I've never been into that. I've never got into Warhammer or anything like that. I used to, yeah, it was like, I don't really know exactly what it was. I think it was just like what I like. I used to like Jurassic Park. I kept my Jurassic Park figures until like quite late on. I had my Power Pods. Can't really remember what else. Like, I got really into. I bought loads of Muppet figurines. I got really into the Muppets figurines. I love the Muppets. They were a big part of. I actually did have one of them knocking around, but I hadn't seen it for a while. I had Janice, the guitar player. My mum kept all my Muppet figures, and once when I went back a few years ago, I took Janice as a little memento. So Janice is knocking around somewhere. My mum sent me a picture of that box that I sent to you. That was the Power Pods. But I mean, she it's funny that she's kind of kept it now. She kept a couple of toys from when I was a nipper that now my son plays with when he goes to stay at theirs, which is really sweet. Yeah. He's immediately broke one, which is quite cute. Like this cherished, like it was a little Mickey Mouse fire truck that my mum's had for 30 odd years, and my son's immediately trounced it into. He snapped Donald off it, which is quite funny. It's all just plastic for landfill.
We loved Scare Electrics in our house.
Yeah, I never had Scare Electrics. I really, really wanted Scare Electrics. I never had it. I had one of them Hot Wheels loops at one point, but they were shit.
Because
Scare Electrics was kind of shit, wasn't it? Was it good but shit? Like,
well, yeah, I think looking back, it's like, you're learning about like mini electronics, and you make this thing go whiz off, and you know it gets quite extreme.
If you were collecting loads of different figures, was it the sort of thing where you would like have them all, you know, you were meticulously collecting, you weren't the kind of kid that would like keep them in their box and nobody is allowed to touch these things? They were like very much for...
No, not at all. No, and I kind of regret that now, because but obviously that's not the fucking point of them, is it? The point is that they're there to be played with. But if I'd been a smarter, more entrepreneurial 12-year-old, I would have kept all my Muppets in the bloody packets, and they're probably worth a fortune now, because they, you know, it's funny actually, because I remember getting the first one. I got really into I loved the Muppets, and it, you know, people talk about loving Muppets Christmas Carol, and they talk about loving, maybe they love Muppets Treasure Island as well, but like I was pretty hardcore Muppets fan, and I remember buying the DVD box set. My favourite Muppet is Animal, because I'm an absolute cliche, and because I like drums, I liked Animal, which is boring as fuck anecdote, isn't it? But and then, to be honest, like I mean, like Animal is my favourite Muppet, but I love Beaker, and I'm a big fan of Rolf, the piano playing dog, as well.
Oh yeah, underrated.
But I think the strength of the Muppets is how they interact together. You know, I think it's just it is a synergy. I think Jim Henson is amazing, and a huge influence on my life, much like the Gorillaz. I think the Muppets and Labyrinth and Fraggle Rock. I love Fraggle Rock. Sesame Street, not so much, funnily enough. I don't really recall watching... Obviously, I'm very aware of the characters of Sesame Street, but I don't really recall watching Sesame Street. But I was pretty deep on the Muppets, and we used to have this VHS of a Christmas film, but it wasn't Christmas Carol. It was where they all go to Fozzie's grandma's for Christmas. I don't know if you've seen that. It was like a TV special, I think, and we had the VHS of it. And I preferred that to Christmas Carol, and I still do, but you can't really find it. It doesn't seem to be on, like... I say I've got Disney Plus and I watch The Simpsons all the time. I also watch The Muppets. Basically, I'm giving the Disney Corporation £10 a month to fucking watch reruns of The Muppets and The Simpsons. And I don't care. It's fucking worth it. Like, but... Yeah, I was pretty deep on the Muppets. There's this one where they go to Fozzie's grandma's for Christmas, and I really loved it. And there's a scene in that where the Electric Mayhem, the band, play Jingle Bell Rock, and it starts really subtle, and then Animal goes mad, and then all of a sudden they do like a really riffed up version of it, which makes sense because actually Sam Chippo said to us the other day, he was like, just before Christmas, he said Jingle Bell Rock is one of the most misleading song titles you've ever heard because it's quite tame, slow, isn't it, as far as rock songs go. But so the Muppets actually did right by the title and amped it up. And I always remember that version, and I always felt very Christmassy when I watched that. And one day we were at Warrington Market with my mum, so I was probably about 11, 12 maybe when I got my first Muppet. And there was like a comic book stall that sold comic booky stuff and action figures and stuff. And I never really had any interest. I used to have Simpsons comics, but like I didn't know about comic books. I didn't buy comics. I wasn't a collector like that. But obviously when you're that age, you're curious by action figures and cartoons. Well, I was anyway. So when we walked past this store, I ended up browsing it, and I saw that they had this like little Muppet figure of Dr. Teeth, the band leader of Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem, who's based on Dr. John. And for whatever reason, I bought it. And then I looked on the back, and it was a series of 5, and I slowly went back to the market and bought the others. And then it kind of spiraled, and I was kind of on eBay trying to get this. I think he'd imported them. See, they weren't like readily available in the UK, and I was like ordering them from America and stuff. Like that was like
that's an expensive habit.
Was collecting. Yeah,
you must have got a lot of those notes through the post saying you need to pay more postage.
Oh, the tax ones. Yeah. It was something that went on, and I don't know at what point I gave up, but I had quite a few. My mum's kept them, and but yeah, like all the bits and stuff have probably been lost. I don't even know what I did. I didn't play with them. I was a little bit older by this point, and I didn't play with them. But I set them all up on my shelf in my room. I was just collecting by this point. I did arrange them, but I didn't play with them, so I'd kind of gone through that phase, I suppose. And actually, do you know what was a big influence on my love of the Muppets was the Keep Fishing video by Weezer.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Great music video.
Were they in that?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think I've seen it.
The Miss Piggy captures, what's the drummer's name? Mind blank.
Pat Wilson.
She captures Pat Wilson in the back. That's a great scene. That's what a great crossover.
There we go.
Yeah. Now, I feel like there needs to be some video, a Yard Act video where you are, or actually, I guess you're sort of cartoons on some of the new album promo. So maybe that's...
Well, yeah. The cartoon thing's really funny, isn't it? Like, I definitely think if I was to really try and get to the core of if there was like a unifying theme, I think cartoons are often seen as like a sort of symbolism of childhood, I suppose. And I think maybe that sort of naivety is something that I'm always trying to get back to, even when I'm writing about more serious, I'm doing air quotes here for the sake, adult themes. I think there's always there's got to be a childlike nature to what you're doing because, and also like those years are really formative and it was vital. Like it was so important that like I've seen the way artists talk about how Gorillaz changed their lives as a band, and not just Gorillaz, but music that can like tap in. Like I think we go through cycles in music where we see like sort of stuff as childish, but what the fuck's wrong with that? Like, what, the world is bleak enough. Like escapism and sort of fantasy are really, really important. Like we use them as sort of filters to sort of get a different perspective on the world. We don't need to just constantly highlight how fucking bleak the world is. We can do that by looking at it. So yeah. So I suppose the formative parts of my childhood, the cartoons and the toys, and I think that's something that I've kept with me, and something that I will continue.
Stay curious.
creativity is just play anyway. All it is play.
That was Yard Act frontman James Smith. Funny fucker is an objective truth. Yard Act have, obviously, as we've said, their second album, Where's My Utopia, that is coming out on March the 1st. They are also going to be going on a big old tour around the country in support of that, which starts on March 13th in Norwich and goes all the way around the country, including a hefty date at London's Hammersmith Apollo, which I think we'll probably both go to, won't we, Giles? Have a big old knees up Definitely. At the Apollo. Nice.
And that's going to be a celebration of a tour, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, like, Yard Act, a band that we have loved at DIY for forever, and it's great to see them doing as well as they should justifiably be doing. Like, it's good when good things happen to good people who are good at what they do. If you have enjoyed this episode, and if you enjoy the musicians and the people that we feature in DIY Magazine, then give us a little subscribe. We are going to be having a break for about a month or so, and then we're going to be kicking off with series 2 of Before They Knew Better in the middle of Feb. If you subscribe, then you will get each episode straight in your inbox on a Tuesday morning when it lands. It's full of more people like James, like all of the other wonderful guests that we've had. For example, Felix White, Killer Mike, May Muller, Olivia Dean, loads of people. It is full of all the people that you will find in DIY's pages, brought to your ears once a week, every week, until we take another break again. So give us a subscribe if you would be so kind. And, you know, in the gap where we've got a month off, you've got 11 other episodes to go back and listen to, should you wish. And while you're at it, DIY Magazine still has our bumper Class of 2024 issue out. That is our December-January special heading into 2024 with a whole host of tips of exactly who you should be listening to keep your finger on that little pulse. That is out, and we have our new issues. Stay tuned for that. That lands right at the start of February, and it's got, I'm going to say, the buzziest band in the country on the cover. Who might it be? We just don't know. If you're up for some lovely live music, we also have DIY's Now and Next tour with Hot Wax and Big Special. That is on sale and coming to a venue near, well, I'm going to say a venue near you. I guess it depends on whether you live in those areas of the country, but a venue near a lot of people throughout April. And if you happen to be in London, then we are continuing our Tuesday night Hallow 2024 series at the Old Blue Last throughout January. That has got loads of hot tips and it's free. Can't argue with that.
Yeah, I think we can sign off by saying thanks for joining us with this. This is a brand new endeavour. It started as an idea and now it's a thing that happens, which is fun. Thank you all for listening. And we're looking forward to doing more of these throughout the year with some interesting people, interesting folk. Yeah, it has been a true pleasure, and the fact that people listen to it and seem to like it is just bloody lovely. So good enough for us. For listening. Good, yeah, it'll do. So yes, thank you for listening. Please continue to listen when we return. Have a nice January, dry, damp, or otherwise, and we'll see you in Feb.